This is a T-Chan here with the Game of Loda, and thank you for joining me. Welcome to episode 53, where I chat with the best people in the game industry 7 days a week. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast for new daily episode filled with inspiring stories. And now let's chat with today's feature guest, Matt Schoen. Matt, it is a go time. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. Let's do this.
Awesome. He is a software engineer with the Unity Labs, working primarily on EditorVR. He is also the co-founder of Defective Studios, so he has worked on many projects from PC games to mobile AR games. Go ahead, Matt. Give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
Sure. So I think my story actually kind of starts with misfortune, which is it's great. It kind of gives you the sob story right off the bat. But basically, I was graduating college. I graduated in 2010 from Boston University. And I'd always been a video game enthusiast. Like as a kid, I played constantly, and I never wanted to go outside and play. I always played video games, and I was always a computer nerd, but didn't actually get into programming until like midway through high school, and then ended up going to college for it. But like I don't know, I was never that motivated to go and just like get a programming job. I kind of wanted to do stuff that was cool, and I was into 3D, I was into games, and I kind of like it was sort of one of those situations where I slowly came to realize that there was this big game industry out there that, actually had opportunities for me. A large part of the story also involves my business partner, Jono Forbes, who's also at Unity with me now and kind of was my game dev compadre early on. And I'll let him tell his half the story if you want to interview him later, but basically it's a similar story, just like always into games, kind of got into programming. And he and I kind of just like fed off each other in terms of like, let's get more and more serious about doing this development thing. And we also both had the same programming teacher in high school who taught us programming through games, like 2D games, really simple games in Java. But it was kind of always just like a thread of my programming experience doing games. And then I fast forward to college, and I was graduating to hopefully work on the senior project that I was doing around, it was sort of stereo TV stuff, like 3D without glasses. And long story short, there was just like a kind of poison team member who it made it a really shitty place or shitty project to work on, and the people that we were working with all kind of eventually parted ways with us, and it was just me and him at the end of the school year, and we were still planning on sort of starting a business around it and getting VC investment, and he kind of like screwed me out of this part of the deal, and that was the final straw, and we just sort of parted ways, not on good terms. And at that point, it was sort of a month after graduation, and I was like, well, I need a job now. But Jono kind of came to me and said, hey, look, like this is, we're in a rare opportunity. We're in a rare spot here where we don't have a lot of responsibilities. We don't have kids. We don't have bills. We don't have, spouses that are depending on us. Like this is the sort of the one shot we have to like just try something on our own. And that was, I guess, enough to convince me to like just start Defective Studios with him. We borrowed some money from our parents for the first, I guess, 9 months, and had like an apartment in Watertown, which is like a suburb of Boston. Kind of just doing. We had already started to get to be a part of the Boston indie dev scene, I guess you might call it. Like there's meetups and stuff. The Boston Unity Group. There's Boston Indies, Boston Postmodern Society. Some new ones that didn't exist back then. But anyway, like there's a lot of stuff that just sort of people who develop games in the Boston area get together and do, and we had just started going to those meetups. And that was kind of like a really great benchmark, I guess, just as we were going along, we forced ourselves to, this was like mostly Jono, I didn't want to do any of it, and I kind of like begrudgingly went along with it, but we forced ourselves to go and present at these meetups, or at least just be a part of them and kind of participate and talk about our game and talk about our, like, just, technical problems we're having, or the how do we start a company, and how do we do this like more seriously. So we had a lot of great mentors there. I got a shout out to Elliot Mitchell, who runs this company called Vermont Digital Arts, who is kind of like, I call him the Boston godfather of indie games, but he still runs the Boston Unity Group, ran it back then like 6 years ago, and just kind of not only was a mentor to us, but also kind of like gave us connections and contracts and things that helped us survive after that initial period. So our first project was called Platformer. It was a evolution of this. Oh, I guess this is kind of a funny tidbit, but like part of what got us started to do Defective Studios was this project that we started called Project Needle Mouse, where we wanted to make a 3 remake of the old school Sonic the Hedgehog games, and we got a fair amount of way through the project with some art and some stuff knocked up in Unity. And we registered a website called needlemouse.com to like just throw up some concept art and like have it as a future, what if this thing becomes real, maybe we'll put a website up there. And it just so happened that like I think like a week later, Sega announced Project Needle Mouse, which was their like I guess it's called Sonic 4 now. But they had like a working title for this new 3D Sonic remake, which was like very polished and well done by Sega by the end of it. But like people thought that our website was Sega's thing, and there was this like little like there were a couple blog articles written about it and stuff like that. And we had this little like taste of I wouldn't even call it fame or success or anything, but just like, wow, wait, there's like a shit ton of people paying attention to this. What do we do? I don't know. So anyway, that was sort of like while I was still in school and like while Jono was still in school, that was sort of a fun little taste of what it might be to be an indie game developer, or at least like all the good parts, none of the bad parts, right? Like we had a little bit of a prototype that we didn't have to suffer much to create, and a whole bunch of people looking at it. So yeah, graduating college, we started this Defective Studios thing. Kind of got connected in Boston and went to a bunch of meetups and stuff. And then kind of fast forward through a couple of contracts that kept us afloat. Another game idea that didn't quite, the platform idea didn't really pan out. That brings us to sort of more recent times where we had taken our games and we're playing around with VR, just doing kind of like, let's port it to VR just for shits and see what happens. Started making a level editor in VR that we could use to make levels for our game. And that got the attention of people at Unity who were working on EditorVR. And then they hired me and Jono to work on EditorVR at Unity. So anyway, that's sort of like the medium story.
Yeah, you like off the bat, you already had a bad experience with like bad people, but the good thing is that you kept going forward and you kept trying to get into the game industry and stuff, and that's cool that you formed your own studio with Jono and you forced yourself to go to networking, which I think a lot of game devs should do, is to definitely go out there and meet up other game developers that have the same passion of yours for sure. Now that you're like experimenting with VR, what are your like key principles for making it a better VR experience?
I'm like probably not the best person on my team to answer that question because I'm more of more focused on the engineering stuff and the architecture of the software. So I implement good design decisions, but I don't necessarily fully understand them. But anyway, my thinking is that a lot of what it comes down to is there are a lot of sort of trained ideas that we think of as intuitive in terms of 2D interfaces, like clicking on buttons and moving a cursor around and reading something like a page, for example, which is already just like, we think of it as totally natural and intuitive, but in fact, it's something that we've learned. We learn how to read, we learn how to use a computer, we learn how to do stuff in 2D. So like, forget everything you know about 2D interfaces, I think is the first step, which is already like, it's really hard. And you're going to have some habits and paradigms that you bring along in. But then in terms of actual like constructive technical things, making advantage of the motion, the 6 DOF controllers, I think is what we've been really getting into in terms of like having UI that is that's fixed in space that you can interact with, or like throw around, or double click on it, or like call to you and stuff like that. Playing with the 3D space and having interactable things that we don't have a lot of buttons to work with, but we do have a lot of space. So just like, put your UI in the world and have it be stuff that kind of makes sense to play around with. Like don't make them cube buttons, make them, I think like the Axis burrito from Job Simulator is a perfect example of just like, oh, it's a burrito, I don't want to pick it up, and I probably want to put it in my mouth because that's what I'm used to doing with a burrito. And like, now that's a get me out of this level thing, which like really doesn't make any sense at all, but people do it and it works, and it's just like not at all something that you have to teach or really put a lot of thought behind.
Yeah, it's a design. Yeah, definitely design from VR. It's just from what I heard, is a whole new experience because, like you say, it's not the 2D plane is not really there. It's all 3D and it's all touch, and the controls are different. So they definitely got to go in with a different perspective. Now, let's take this on a more personal level. And creating a game can be very long and difficult, so I'm pretty sure you had some bad moments. What was the worst moment of your career? That one moment that's still vivid in your mind? Be very detailed and tell us that personal story.
Sure. Oh God, there's so many. I I think one that really it's not even the worst. Like I didn't feel the worst or whatever. Like I'm trying to think. I also want to like save face for anyone else involved. But yeah, one that was like just me personally was very early on. After so Platformer was our first project as Defective Studios, and as all of them would be, if I go into more detail, you'll notice that like these things turn into just sort of like an idea that morphs and evolves and mutates into something that's completely different but somehow related. So Platformer was this level editor tech that we were trying to put together to make that needle mouse project easier to work on. And you basically would just sort of like draw like with like a brush, and it would click these blocks together so that you could make a more make like a 2D platformer level by just kind of sweeping your mouse around as opposed to having to like move islands individually and kind of like manipulate individual art assets. And as a part of that, we wanted people to be able to sort of share and collaborate on levels and have it be a kind of cloud-based type thing. But there's a lot of sort of back-end work they have to do to make a Unity game, not just game networking, but like share assets across. So like if I want to make a new model, import it into my project, and then share it with you, things have gotten a lot better since then. This is like 5 years ago, but even now it's still like you have to build your own system to do it. So we started working on the system. We called it Asset Cloud, and we got pretty far. A lot of the local people in Boston were into it and were using it, and it definitely was something. If we wanted to make money off of it, would have to be like there were some technical things on Unity side, and like in general, I was like working with them as a partner would have been really great. And I kind of got led on by this biz dev guy who, leading up to GDC one year, I had emailed. Kind of a contact that from the asset store. It's a good thing I can't remember because I'm not going to name names anyway. But so sort of through a contact, I was talking to this guy in the biz dev department who said, "Yeah, come talk to me at GDC. It sounds great." And I think sort of what happened was that like he thought that we were a bigger shop than we were, or maybe he was just intentionally leading me on. But then I get to GDC, and basically he like almost laughed in my face and was like, "Are you kidding? Like, you really think that Unity's going to care about this little like 2-man operation who's working on this thing?" Yeah, and so he's no longer with the company. I don't know. I think this individual probably was just overly dismissive, but it was just kind of like a reality check where I was sort of swept up in this even though we're small and even though we're kind of underdogs and we're unproven, everyone has sort of given us the benefit of the doubt. And then that was the first moment where someone didn't give me the benefit of the doubt. And I kind of ruined the rest of my GDC, and I came home and I was like, we've been doing this for like over a year and we still haven't gotten any money. We're screwed. I just wasted all this time. And I moped for like a good day and a half or like a couple of days, I think. And at some point in my moping, I realized that like all of this was speculation anyway. This is all just sort of me getting more and more worried about my place in the world or what have you. And, on the surface of it, we still have created something between ourselves. Like we didn't sell it, and maybe it's not something that was a good idea business wise, but it's still stuff we can put on a resume. It's still stuff that is a kind of portfolio piece, if you will, which is by no means what we were trying to do. Like, we wanted to make a solvent, successful indie studio that sold millions of copies and everyone loved them, and everyone got up on the IGF award and cried and said how thankful we were. I mean, that was sort of the goal, whether or not we kind of expressed it in real terms. But yeah, I think that lesson was really just, learn to compromise, I guess, or just learn to be happy with something that is not exactly, but still pretty close to what you had dreamed for.
Yeah, and it's not like you could go back in the past and change it. So you just gotta learn from it and hopefully not make the same mistake and just improve upon it. And another important thing is like, that person is so messed up for doing that for you, man. Come on now.
Yes, I mean, at the same time, yeah. Like, what were we thinking, right? Like, it was. We were definitely in over our head, and kind of needed someone to either give us a big helping hand and sort of say, like, yeah, okay, we'll take it from here, or give us that reality check.
Oh man.
So,
what do you want to make sure game devs take away from that experience? Or I guess maybe like to not be led in, because I heard stories of game devs being like led on by someone that say, oh, they got an investor so they could make this game, but in the end they never had an investor. Like, how can we watch out for like those type of people, like poisonous people, I guess you could say?
Well, and also like let me be clear. Like, I don't even know that these are poisonous people. I think what you're describing is honestly the way the business world works. Like the way that venture capital works a lot in my experience is that there is a lot of either you could call it leading on, or just kind of like, we're going to give you a wait and see. We're a wait and see. It's actually really hard to get a flat no from a lot of these people, at least up until, you're about to sign the paper or whatever, or you think you might be about to sign the paper. But yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it's like, it's sort of, it's a little heartbreaking to have to give this advice, but just like be super skeptical, like always, always demand it in writing. Like don't believe it until it is in writing. There's probably an expression, something about like not until it's cash in the bank, but yeah, I think that's just the reality of the situation, is that it's in anyone's interest to make the deal to make it seem like they're favorable to it until it's not in their interest to be favorable. I mean, maybe they were looking at 3 or 4 different games at the same time and saying, "Oh, yours is great, I love you," and they're saying the same thing to all 3 people, and then they say, "Okay, this is the one we're making the deal with. Sorry, everyone else, you didn't make the cut." Like it's just sort of, you can't always get what you want, and don't be too hopeful. Don't be too don't bank on something that is not real until it actually comes through.
Ooh, remain skeptical. I like that. Now, just take this even more personal. What do you think was like the best investment you've made? And it can be investment of money, time, or energy. And how did you decide to make that investment?
Boy, I mean, I think, money. I don't think I've made very many money investments, period, or smart ones to say the least. Didn't buy into Bitcoin. I think learning Unity probably, like that was a big time investment, and was a much harder bet back in the day than it is now. I think I started learning it around version 2, and that was when it was like Mac only, and the idea of a kind of consumer level 3D engine or game engine was laughable. Like there was I think Ogre 3D, which was an open source one. Blender sort of had a game engine, but it was terrible. And then, anything else was like, you got to pay $1 million for Unreal or idTech or Source or something. So back in those days, it was also the only thing I had available. I didn't have $1 million to go buy those other engines, or I didn't have connections with people who were already in the game industry. So, and I guess I'm like, there was Torque, there were other kind of indie level offerings at the time that I just wasn't aware of. But anyway, yeah, it was definitely something that had no return for years, at least in terms of money. And, it was something that I just did because it was really fascinating to me. And it wasn't an investment at the time. I didn't consider it an investment in my career or anything like that. But, obviously, clearly it's paid off. That's sort of an obvious one, but like learning a skill, learning my main trade skill was my best investment.
Nice. And Unity is still a great engine. You can use it on any platform, like mobile and consoles and everything.
I think it's like 28 or 32 platforms that we support. Yeah. So that is definitely the selling point for sure.
Awesome. Don't forget, Game Dust. You can check out my website for everything we just talked about today. And now, Matt, we have reached a crunch time. It's like the phase, of course, that Game Dust dread, but we are here to overcome it. Basically, I will ask you quick questions, and you'll be giving us a ton of valuable information in return. Are you ready to crush it and release this show?
Sure. Let's do it.
What was holding you back from joining the game industry?
Not even knowing that it was a thing. Like not even knowing that you could make money doing this stuff.
Oh yeah, now you can make a lot of money with the right hits, for sure. What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Persistence. Just not giving up until a problem is solved.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh boy. I think when I was choosing what kind of college to go to, this is very specific, but I think it can be generalized. You can be let me think about this. You can be an engineer and make films, but you can't go to film school and work as an engineer.
Oh, let's say that again.
So yeah, it's really specific, but basically the point is like, there's things like engineering which require a lot of training and kind of certification, I guess. People need to see that you've gone to school and learned to do engineering. Whereas what I was deciding to do at the time was more of like an artistic kind of, think of it like being a musician. If I want to be a musician or a lawyer, you can go to law school and still play in a band, but you can't be a musician and then decide that you want to go be a lawyer.
Gotcha. I got you. What resources should we game devs use?
Use the web and online communities, but do what you can to find like an IGDA or a user group that for Maya or Unity or whatever it is that you use. Try to find people meeting up in person near you that you can go and like drink with and eat with and hang out with, and also network and talk about games and stuff. But the in-person stuff is really invaluable, and like it's much harder to ignore you when you're right there in the flesh.
Yeah, talk with people that have the same passion as you. That's what you need to do. Now, this next question is a bit of a doozy, so take your time if you need to. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of, and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to become a great game developer?
Are there still people in this world? Are there other people who know how to get? Yeah. So definitely still networking and going and finding and meeting other game devs. I got started on my own, kind of like independently, and just said I want to make a project and went and did it, which is great, and I learned a lot that way. But I also missed out on a lot of mentorship and just learning from more experienced, more wizened individuals. So do a little bit of both. Find a project that you really want to make and start working on it on your own. Get a job somewhere that has people who know what they're doing, and you can learn from them, and just make games, have ideas, make them happen.
Yes, find mentorship, and most importantly, just get started. Matt, we have reached the end. Go ahead and give us a parting piece of guidance in how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
So guidance, I don't know what this is, but one of my favorite sort of expressions that it's come up a lot when I talk about my career is luck is the intersection of preparation and opportunity. So you have to have done the work and gotten yourself to a certain point, and you also have to sort of stick around long enough for the opportunity to find you.
Oh, I like that. And how can we connect with you?
Oh, right. You can on Twitter at @MTSchoen. I don't want to give out my email, but yeah, I think just tweet me at @MTSchoen is the best way.
Yeah, Matt, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and for that, we are truly grateful. Check him out, Game Desk. He's working on a lot of cool VR stuff, and we will catch you next time.
All right, thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening, and remember that knowledge is only potential power. Execution is the game. I am so excited to announce our first sponsored giveaway with Game Dev Underground, where a winner can get a free 1-hour consultation with the founder, Tim Rusbeck. So if you have any questions on building and launching your game, get on this giveaway ASAP. This is a $1,000 value, and it can be yours. All you have to do is go to the show notes page at GameDevLoadout.com and sign up for my email list. That's it. So until then, keep on making great games, and I will catch you on the next episode. Bye.